Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. Welcome to episode 2502 of The Tom Woods Show with our old friend Jeremy Kauffman, who's back with us, former executive director of the Free State Project, U.S. Senate candidate from New Hampshire as a Libertarian and a delegate to the Libertarian National Convention that just wrapped up not too long ago. Jeremy, welcome back.
It's always great to be on your show, Tom. And what a wild month it's been for libertarians.
It totally has. Absolutely crazy. And it's like all of a sudden, I mean, not like the word libertarian was the most popular one in the English language to start with. But now there is an entire demographic that if you say the word libertarian, they automatically think there's something wrong with you. You're mentally deranged. You're a degenerate. And I mean, it's hard to blame them, but that's the situation we're in now. Now it's almost impossible to talk to people using that word. So I want to talk about that a bit and then talk about Trump and 2024 and all the rest of it. But why don't we start with, look, I just had Clint Russell on, and so people have kind of heard a little bit of the nuts and bolts of what went on at the Libertarian Convention. So I don't really want to get into that too much, but I guess I want to know how is your outlook different between the day you got to the convention and today in terms of what your orientation is, especially going into 2024, the November election?
Well, I don't know if your audience would have seen this photo, but there's a photo of a guy at the LP National Convention holding a sign that says MAGA equals socialist. It's one of the most used photos from the event. And that guy was me. It was me. I was the person holding that sign. So I am a pretty diehard libertarian. It's part of why I live in New Hampshire, is because I'm very committed to libertarianism and a fairly absolute and form of it. But so that's that's my take on Trump. That a lot of republicanism generally, that it's on the socialist side of things, not as socialist as the Democrats perhaps, but still on the socialist side of things. But then the Libertarian Party, against my wishes and the wishes of every delegate in New Hampshire, nominated someone who just might be the worst nominee they've ever put forth, which is impressive when you consider the pantheon of nominees the Libertarian Party has put forth. So I am now 100% backing Trump in 2024. I think what Angela McArdle has done with the LP is very similar to what we've done in New Hampshire, which is we found the power in becoming this real political bloc. Because if you're a real clear political bloc, even if you're only 3%, you get pandered to. And so if there's something that the Libertarian Party can actually accomplish, being a bloc that can be pandered to is something real. So it went from, we've got two different kind of directions, happening at once within the LP and the libertarian movement generally. And it's kind of interesting. But I'm on the side of, let's be realistic and let's get what we can get, which means backing Trump.
All right. So given what you said, that both parties to one degree or another more or less admit the socialist principle in some areas of their platform. Given that you admit that, there isn't much point in me sitting here saying, well, he was a big spender. And I know you already know that. You already know he was a big spender. The way I look at it, by the way, is that for a long time, I thought to myself, maybe there's some possibility, however remote, 1%, that there'll be some kind of reform of the entitlement program so that they don't completely collapse. But it's pretty obvious at this point that's just not happening. There's no chance of that happening. There's no interest in that happening. They are just going to collapse. That's the way apparently the political classes want to run this. They're just going to collapse. So I've come to the conclusion that the old concerns about balancing the budget are, I would like to see that. I'd like to see the budget cut more than I'd like to see it balanced, actually. But this now seems very quaint because there's no constituency for that at all. There's you, me, and 12 other people. Most people who say they want to cut, even the Tea Party people who said they wanted to cut the budget, when you would poll them and say, well, here are some areas. Where do you want to cut? The only area they could all agree on was foreign aid, which is not that big of a chunk of the dough. So I'm not going to focus on the big spend, because that's just not ever going to change. I don't see that ever changing until a genuine fiscal disaster occurs, and they have to change it. So it doesn't matter what candidate you select. The budget is going to be a disaster. That's my opinion. But first of all, let me pause there. Do you agree with that analysis?
I agree with you 100%. Look, this is just a subset of the fact that most people don't understand things, right? They don't, and they're not going to. And something that libertarians need to reckon with is that there's a huge portion of the country, and even clearly, even in the reaction of Chase, I'm not in any way saying I'm above this, that are going to put personality and attitude and disposition. They're going to give a huge primacy in who they support, and these people like the attitude and disposition of Donald Trump. And so, the lesson here, I think Vivek is the guy. If you still care about libertarian outcomes, seeing what Vivek is doing, playing the actual, games, recognizing what needs to happen to win, while still signaling he actually understands, the reality of it. And that's what you got to do. You got to be going in that direction.
All right. So I'm not going to talk about the budget stuff. And the thing is that we all know about Fauci and lockdowns and whatever. And Trump did turn around. Now we can talk about the vaccine and stuff, but Trump did turn around, like as the months went on. Like he was saying, well, I sure hope we're back to normal by Easter. And Fauci was going, well, I don't really think that's going to happen. But by the fall, he brought in Scott Atlas, and I'm very fond of Scott Atlas, who said a lot of very important, sensible things. But yeah, early on, he definitely was not good. But the thing is, I could, if I were in a generous mood, say, here he is, this political outsider. We have this what appeared to be an unprecedented crisis occurring. I wonder how many people in his shoes would have actually said, I am absolutely shutting down all input from the existing public health establishment, and I'm going with my gut. Almost no one could have done that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I would have done that, but very few people would do that. Fair enough. But the unforced errors are what particularly are galling to me, like telling the governor of Georgia he's opening too early, or predicting a bloodbath in Sweden because they didn't lock down. It seems hard to reward somebody like that.
Look, I am not, to me, voting for Trump in 2024 does not mean endorsing everything he's done, agreeing with everything he's done, or, anything like that. When you go into the voting booth, you have the options that you have. No sane person, there's not a single listener that you have that's backing Joe Biden, I'm going to assume, so I don't even need to talk about that. If you're going to back the Libertarian candidate, I think it needs to be someone, you are obviously throwing your vote away. I'm not above that. I voted for the Libertarian candidate for president at least 3 times in my life. I'd have to count it. It might be 4, but at least 3. And it's, if I'm going to do that, it's got to be someone who I actually believe in. And it's difficult to imagine Chase Oliver being better on COVID in his spirit in terms of his reaction. He would have been the same thing. He would have been worse. Maybe he wouldn't have leveraged the government to the exact same degree. But part of what's important here is, like, the president is a leader. This is real. People look to him, and if you're going to have someone in that seat, you want someone to react in a certain way. And I actually think Trump does have the best spirit for that. I think Trump is also incredibly. I think he's very cynical, so he's going to follow public opinion at times when he feels that he needs to. And then also, he is someone who's going to double down on every single decision he ever makes. So once he's made a decision, he's going to defend it to the death and basically never admit that he was wrong. He may do it differently next time, but he would never admit that he got anything wrong in the slightest. And that's just what you're signing up for better or worse. But your choices are Biden, Trump, or Oliver. Or don't vote, but in New Hampshire, that's not a choice. We all go and vote here. We have too many good candidates to vote for. So I'm going to be in the voting booth anyway. If those are my 3 choices, I'm going with Trump. Easy. And maybe libertarians get in the cabinet, and maybe Ross Ulbricht gets feed. Trump saying something still only makes it a maybe, but at least he's saying it,
A lot more people know about Ross now than, and it's an absolutely, his sentence is absolutely indefensible by anybody, conservative, liberal, leftist, libertarian, absolutely indefensible. And for a long time, we've just been the 0.03% of the public who's aware of it, talking about it. And the fact that now that name is being talked about, when he's been in prison now for 10 years, it's devastating. It's heartbreaking. I mean, we all know his mom. Why do we know his mom? Because she worked so hard for that kid. Not a kid, but you know what I mean. I mean, she has gone from one end of the country to the other, just trying to see what she can possibly do to help her son. And now there's some prospect that may be, yes, I know this could have been done in 2020. It could have been early 2021. I'm absolutely aware of that. But I do think it's more likely that it could happen now. And some people have said, look, Joe Biden could take the wind out of Trump's sails right now by just pardoning him if he had any political sense, but he doesn't. So it's probably unlikely to happen. But here's the thing that would stick in the old craw, though. Even having said that, I recognize that Trump's not perfect by any stretch. He's got a mixed track record, and you go into that with your eyes open. But my gosh, if Nikki Haley or Lindsey Graham wind up in any positions of influence, I feel like you'd have to walk around in sackcloth and ashes after that.
Right. Yeah, look, libertarians aren't going to, the ideas of libertarianism at this point, I'm of the opinion, are basically too complex for most people to understand. Like the idea of libertarians winning through democracy, understanding, it's this idea of like, imagine running anything else complex. Imagine if McDonald's had to operate via democracy and all their customers had to vote on how the company ran. And you'd have to go around trying to convince the customers, how an efficient corporation has to actually operate. You wouldn't be able to persuade them of it, and you'd just get a mess. So libertarian ideas are correct, but they're just beyond a lot of people's understanding. So if you're trapped in a democracy, who can you coalition with? How can you get people onto your side? And quite frankly, a lot of the MAGA people, in my experience, are spiritually, in spirit, somewhat libertarian aligned. They have an independentness to them. They are, mostly pro-business. I'm not going to defend all their views again. Some of them get illibertarian for me, and I would disagree with them. But there is an essence that I think that you can work with. And I know in New Hampshire, one of the strategies that we take for conservative and libertarian alliances that I think can also work nationally is this idea that conservatives have been dominated by the federal government. And so if you want to enact conservatism, if you want to enact your principles, if we could get the larger governments out of the way, then you would be able to enact them locally, right? And so to see the government as a threat to the type of society that you would want.
Folks, in this day and age, everything seems to be competing for your time, and a lot of those things are a complete waste of your time. Well, I've got an excellent way to deal with this information overload. With the Blinkist app, you can absorb huge amounts of information in 27 nonfiction categories: history, philosophy, parenting, career, technology, religion, you name it. And Blinkist condenses each book into 15-minute summaries you can read or listen to. So remember, that means if you've got a half-hour commute each way, you can be absorbing the equivalent of 4 books. How impressive of a person you think you would become if you did that. Among the thousands and thousands of titles at Blinkist, you'll also find libertarian classics. There aren't many companies that would do that. You'll find Murray Rothbard in there. You find Milton Friedman in there. You'll even find old Tom Woods in there. Right now, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/Woods to start your 7-day free trial and get 40% off a Blinkist premium membership. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/Woods to get 40% off and a 7-day free trial. Blinkist.com/Woods. And now, for a limited time, you can even use Blinkist Connect to share your premium account. You'll get 2 premium subscriptions for the price of 1. I don't want to get into the weeds of this because I think there is a difference between the people who belong to that short-lived movement known as the Tea Party and the Trump people. There's some overlap, but I think the Trump people have a harder edge. But all the same, I spoke to a lot of Tea Party groups in, let's say, probably like 2010, 11, 12, somewhere around then. And some people would criticize me for that. Well, these aren't libertarians. And I never quite got that. I mean, and by the way, with my show, it's like, that guy's not a libertarian. Well, okay, but so what? This is dumb. I'm only supposed to talk to certain kind of people. I like to talk to all kinds of people and tell them, because I can learn from other people and they can learn from me, is my quaint little idea. But what I found at these Tea Party meetings was that the grassroots people were willing to listen to ideas that were not approved by the New York Times. So I had a book, as you may know, in 2010 called Nullification, about the right of the states to obstruct the enforcement of an unconstitutional law within their borders. And I believe that the case for that, historically and every other way, is absolutely unimpeachably correct. Like there's no, my book Nullification cannot be refuted, in my opinion, cannot be refuted. But you try saying that, like I couldn't get Glenn Beck even to talk about it because the guy who was kind of, his manager or in charge of things was a lawyer. And Jeremy, they didn't teach this in law school, so this must be some kind of crank. However, the Tea Party people would listen to me because they would say, well, look, we've tried what the fashionable voices in our movement have recommended for years and years, and it's not getting us anywhere. So what if we go off script? What if we do something that is not on the 3x5 card of allowable opinion? And I feel like, to back up what you said, some of the Trump people, they are willing to consider, well, yeah, I know that the New York Times doesn't want us to think X or Y, but that's all the more reason I want to consider X or Y. And that's the kind of open-minded person that I think I can make some headway with. And I think, like Vivek, for example, is way, way more principled than Trump. And he has a well-thought-out worldview and all that. And they love him. And they love him. Why do they love him? Because I think, as you say, implicitly, there is some good in them. There's a lot of good in them. There's a lot of good instincts. The fact that they can withstand propaganda from every single major opinion-molding source in our society means they're better than half the Libertarian Party.
Exactly. And that's such a fascinating thing, because Vivek is, there's some people who find me controversial. Vivek has no problem signal boosting me, associating with me. He's done this multiple times as we introduce him, this kind of thing. And then there are libertarians inside of the Libertarian Party who want to cancel me, from the left. And so it's really remarkable. I think it is, to me, and I don't know if you want to get into this, but it does relate to this idea of, well, is libertarianism neither left nor right, or do libertarians kind of tend to be either left or right as well? And this isn't something that we can actually, escape. Because I think a lot of the fights that we have, even you're saying, we're here saying, as I consider myself right wing, I think you do too. That we're here saying, oh, let's pull from the Tea Party, whereas the sort of regime libertarian, the DC libertarian, whatever you want to call them, wants to pull from the gender pride festival and and wherever they're trying to pull from, and says, if someone listens to Alex Jones, they're a terrible person and you shouldn't engage with them. But I think that, they're both trying to pull from the side that they see themselves as closer to, because they're spiritually or more right or left. And we're not actually above it or below it or whatever.
Right. Well, I just did an episode with Jeff Deist and Dan McCarthy, and Dan said, part of the problem with the Libertarian Project is this idea we're neither right nor left. We're a third thing. And so we can bring together matter and antimatter, and somehow it'll all work together because we're some third thing. I don't think that does work. I think you do have an identity crisis. You have to figure out who you are. But also, it seems to me there is absolutely no reason. Now, I'm not saying it never happens. I know people from the left who have come over to our side. Some of them have turned out to be really, really great, and I'm thrilled we have. But in general, I feel like I'm 3/4 of the way there when I'm talking, because I can talk about private property. I can talk about constitutionally limited government as a way to get people started and thinking. I can talk about a whole bunch of things. The family, the rights of locality, whatever I want to say, I can get through to these people. But if I were on the left and I've got pretty much everything in my pocket, I got the corporations, I got the universities, I got entertainment, I got so much, I have part of the Republican Party and all of the Democratic Party, why would I leave? And especially to go to a party that's not going anywhere electorally. And moreover, who actually thinks to himself, one of my prime issues is discrimination against LGBT people, so therefore let's abolish the government? How does that follow? Who's Who's following that route?
I couldn't tell you. I don't, I don't really get it. I try to talk to some of these people, and I honestly feel like I'm like beating my head against the wall, because I feel like I can say, well, this is how we disagree, and their attitude is, no, I'm a real libertarian and you're not. And it's like, well, okay, then there feels like there's just very few. That's not exclusively true, but I found that there's just very little. There's very little self-awareness there, and that quote that you had about libertarian, therefore we can combine matter and antimatter, I think is spot on, and that's the central problem, because it is true that libertarianism and authoritarianism are a different axis that's not left and right. Like, this is true. But the fact that there's a different axis in addition to this other doesn't make the other axis go away. And so, and to have any hope for that project of working together, and I'm not even saying I'm holding out hope for it working together, but if you wanted to, it would start by both sides being able to at least recognize it. And if you can't recognize it, then you're stuck in, a struggle over who's the real libertarian and what does libertarian mean. And I think this is largely what's going on within the Libertarian Party and in the movement more generally, over the word, this fight between left and right over what a libertarian is.
I've got Vivek coming back on the show in the not too distant future. He was traveling, then I'm traveling this week, and so we're going to make it happen. And I'm also getting Congressman Thomas Massie back on the show, who 99.9% of the time I think is just, I think he's a very, very likable guy, very interesting guy, very smart guy. But he kind of points to, in the example of his political career, he kind of points to a major weakness, not of all the Trump followers, but of a certain brand of them, where he's been right on basically everything. You could nitpick him about personnel choices, but I wouldn't be, people in glass houses can't throw stones. Like the guy who appointed Nikki Haley to something and all these other neocons can't really be criticizing Massie for which person he wants to be speaker or something like that. But like Massie was dead right in March 2020 to oppose that giant spending bill. Like, he should not have been criticized for that. And if Trump had said, good for you, we need to stand up to this bill, everyone would have lined up and said Massie's a hero, because they know in their hearts that is what they're supposed to favor. But Massie wasn't favored by Trump. But what's interesting about Massie is, nevertheless, he has backed Trump when Trump has been right, despite the fact that Trump has badmouthed him, tried to primary him. He just has principles that he sticks by. And so the whole, like all the ridiculous legal cases against Trump that any idiot can see through, Massie has defended him. He's not been petty. And he hasn't said, well, Trump hasn't been that nice to me, so I'm not. That has nothing to do with it. He's a good guy, and I'm glad that I've had an opportunity to have him on, that he's coming on again. But that's the kind of I can respect the Trump folks who say, look, what Trump represents is what I like. He represents a middle finger to the establishment. He represents basically a giant no. Hell no, we won't go to the establishment. And that I like. But some of his individual decisions, I'm not that thrilled with. And I'm certainly not going to like or dislike somebody on the basis of how Trump feels about him, at 5:33 p.m., on June 30th. You know what I mean? Like, that I can respect. It's the Massie is an absolute hero, but suddenly I can't like him because Trump tells me not to. Or I can't like Vivek for 3 days. You remember that? So yeah. Vivek was sort of okay and would get compliments, but then toward the end of Iowa, when he started to look like maybe he was getting some momentum, all of a sudden the memo went out. You can't like Vivek; he's not part of us. And then 3 days later, Vivek endorses him, and then it's okay. Everybody loves Vivek. I can't be part. No thinking person can be part of that.
Well, that's kind of exactly right. So, look, Thomas Massie is the greatest libertarian politician alive. When I ran into him in DC, I asked him if he would become king of the United States. I said, let's throw away the Constitution. Let's make Massie king. Let's get a real movement for this. So maybe you can bring that up again when you see him. If enough people ask him, I think he might go for it. He's handled it masterfully. He's now the one guy who actually can criticize Trump because he's shown that he was able to do so, and he beat him. and very few people have. So Massie has an incredible position for himself right now, but he's got to use it in the right way because of Trump's psychology, which Vivek also, I think, understood perfectly. I think if there's someone to take notes from, it's him. And he understood that this is the only way to do it. This is Trump's personality. He's going to win. This is the only way you can do it if you want to get anywhere. And what that psychology is among some of the supporters, which we just have to kind of accept, is there's a portion of the country that is going to be attracted to the most dominant person in every situation. Because that's what Trump is. He's the most dominant person, and they can form their psychology among the most dominant leader. Trump does not win on prestige. He wins by punching people in the face. And so he is someone who is the most assertive and dominant personality, and that's what these people are attracted to. And part of their psychology is it's just going to go with him. So they're not. It's going to be really hard to get these kinds of people to question their leader. The way to get them to reject him would be for someone else to become that alpha figure in their head. And so, but you're not gonna argue them out of it. Someone's got to punch Trump someone have to punch Trump in the face for that to happen. And so metaphorically, you know what I mean? So successfully. But Trump is legitimately, you're not going to do that to him. That's why he wins all the time, because he's like the hardest guy to do that to in the world. And so I think he no one could do it to him successfully during this campaign. That's why he's going to be president again. And so the question is, where do you go from there? And one of the things that would be amazing and that we can hope for and try to help nudge into happening is that movement gets channeled into Vivek, who could potentially do the performance side of what's necessary and actually be able to do the policy side. Because that would be amazing if you could have someone like that. And if it's not Vivek, maybe Massie. But we got to hope that the heir to Trump, if Trumpism isn't going anywhere, the idea, the strategy, we got to hope the heir is someone more libertarian, down the road.
Yeah, exactly. Because and when we say more libertarian, what we really mean is wants to go to war with this regime. That's what we mean.
Well, that is the other hope. See, the hope would be that one, Trump is more willing because he's now been mugged, by the system.
Yeah.
Which in the classic graph, you ever see that classic flow chart about how a libertarian has a family and they become conservative? And, if a liberal starts a business, they become more libertarian. And the one that flows conservative to libertarian gets charged with a crime. So when because you see what the system is like from the other side, and you stop being as sympathetic, to the system. So maybe Trump will change. The other hope is Trump always wanted to do it, but was incompetent at doing it or failed to do it, and that he either would have learned more or will have a better team. Okay, this would be the other thing to hope for. And look, I'm not a Trump. I'm trying to give honest answers here. I'm not saying any of these things are givens, but these are the things that could happen. And since your other choices are 0% of anything and 0% of anything, something is better.
Hey, folks, just when you thought there were no further ways old Woods could improve your life, along comes another one. Father's Day's coming up. You could get Dad the same old gift that you get him every year, that everybody else gets him, or some other knickknack to put on a shelf somewhere, or you could get him what he really wants, and that is steak. The Father's Day experts at Omaha Steaks, where the Woods family has been getting steaks for at least 12 years, have made it easy to put a smile on the big guy's face this summer with hand-selected gift packages starting at just $89. Just go to omahasteaks.com, use promo code WOODS at checkout for an additional discount when you shop gourmet gift packages for Father's Day. With Omaha Steaks, the possibilities are endless. Endless flavor, endless variety, and endless value. Truly, they have perfected more than steak, and your dad is guaranteed to love every bite. Pick from premium proteins like the juicy pork chops, air-chilled chicken, and beefy burgers. Go to omahasteaks.com, use promo code WOODS to get an exclusive savings. Shop for unforgettable gifts that are guaranteed to make Dad's day. Because if there's one thing Omaha Steaks knows, it's that dads want steak. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code WOODS at checkout to save on exclusive packages starting at just $89. Yeah, and at this point, it really is the case that the person who's choosing the judges is going to set the tone for American society for a long time to come, because those judges want to get into your life in all kinds of crazy ways. So that's also very important. Tell me in a brief nutshell. I just had an episode a couple episodes ago with Robert Barnes talking about the significance of the Trump verdict in New York. And that was one of my most popular episodes ever. So tell me in a nutshell, when you heard about that, what was your first reaction to what it means in the big picture?
Well, I've already been kind of red-pilled on the rule of law and the degree to which it's real in the United States. So I guess it wasn't as big of a blow to me personally as it probably was to a lot of people. But for anyone who hasn't been, woken up on these issues, I think the idea that I think a lot of people, many people have sort of idealized and false notions about how justice works. And at the end of the day, it's who's in that room and who's voting and who raises their hand. And this idea that that system always will or is even generally capable of calling balls and strikes the way that we might want it to be able to, I think this exposes very clearly that it can't. I think it shows the degree, that idea of that 3 felonies a day idea of there being an incredible amount of crimes that people are committing all of the time, that where there's an incredible amount of discretion. And so they go after you for political reasons. Look, I think this partially happened to me personally, right? My company was sued out of existence by the federal government. I don't need to tell that whole story, but we were keeping videos online that were very politically unpopular, and the government could have sued a lot of companies. They happened to choose to sue mine, and so I think it's definitely something that happens all the time. That these actors are political, and that there's incredible discretion. And look, you know what, Tom? It's the way the game works. And I think the answer for libertarians to go from here is to do the same thing. Because I'll tell you what, we're doing it in New Hampshire, but in reverse. We make sure the librarians are libertarians. We make sure the state attorneys are libertarians. And so we're trying to do the same exact thing, take as many positions as you can, because this is the only way you can actually win. Because this is real power and it's how the world actually works. And, it kind of took me a long time to get it. But if it is what it is, how do I change it? I can't. So I just got to meet the world where it is.
Well, to me, I mean, I hear everything you're saying, and I do think it's the case that I think a lot of people got their ideas of the U.S. government. I'm dating myself a bit here, but from Schoolhouse Rock, where they would sing a little song about how a bill becomes a law and all this and that. We have 3 branches of government. This prevents abuse or whatever it is. And then the exact opposite is what's going on 24 hours a day. Exact opposite of what you just saw on your little TV. And this in particular, this is the thing is everybody involved knows that they're just going after Trump because they hate him. And the thing is, I think to myself, geez, you hate him? Good thing I'm not running things. I mean, you would be begging to have Trump back, but they can't even take this guy. But so they hate him, and so they trump up this, so to speak, this whole thing. And to me, I think this is even though you're right, though we already know the legal system is corrupt, but generally, I think this is one of the most disturbing political developments of my entire life. And that's my assessment of it. So I thought it was very revealing that if you look at, and I hate to keep bringing this up because I don't care at this point, the Libertarian Party's nominee and the vice presidential nominee. Well, the nominee took 2 days to say anything at all, and it was mostly dismissive. I mean, it was like not taking the situation seriously. And the vice presidential candidate actually made fun of the situation, just laughed at the situation. Oh, I wonder if this means that Trump will be prohibited from voting for Chase Oliver and me, because I'm sure we were all, champing at the bit to do that. That was his answer. I mean, these are profoundly unserious people. It seems to me like this. I could very, very easily justify or understand somebody saying, there are a lot of things about Trump that I wish I could change, but that I can't. However, this thing that they've tried to do to him is so dangerous for me and for the country that if I sit back and don't do anything, or if I vote for Chase Oliver or whatever, I'm not really making clear how opposed to this I am and that it has got to stop. I have to register a protest urgently to what's just happened. I don't see how you can fault somebody for that. It doesn't mean that they're going to approve of everything the guy did. I mean, let's not be children here. But there is a big picture thing going on, and I can understand somebody say, of course I'm going to vote for Trump right now. I wasn't planning to a week ago, but you're darn right I'm voting for him now. I can understand that.
Absolutely. Look, their reactions to everything are only going to be the progressive reaction to everything, right? They have the progressive reaction to COVID. They have the progressive reaction to Trump being convicted. They have the open borders, or whatever. It's the progressive opinion on everything. To the extent that you can wed progressivism and libertarianism together, that's what you're going to get from that. And there is a libertarian I respect a lot who was asking, well, why would this make you want to vote for him? That it didn't make sense to him. And this is someone I respect. And the answer that I gave was, it's an iterated game. This is something that happens, again and again. Systems respond to incentives. And so if you reward this kind of behavior versus if you disincentivize this behavior, will change how much of this behavior you get. So the more political prosecutions go unpunished, the more that they work, the more you will get more of them. And so if you don't like the idea of political prosecutions, then certainly it makes sense to support someone who's being, politically prosecuted.
All right. So tell me, I mean, you're more plugged in than I am, in the sense that you live in a state that was, I don't know if the word is targeted, but that was designated. Maybe designated is a more neutral word, by libertarians for to move there because there's strength in numbers, and maybe we can move to a place where we can get some sensible things done and not live under the iron fist all the time. So you're surrounded by people who think the way we do. Would you say you have your finger on the pulse of the way a lot of people are thinking? Is it just a mishmash of different ideas, or are people settling on one course of action, or what?
I would say I have a pretty good pulse on the libertarians in New Hampshire, and there are a lot of them. I would say that the New Hampshire libertarian movement is largely right-leaning libertarian. We had a lot of people here who had a problem with, Joe in 2020 over the Black Lives Matter issue and stuff like this. It was libertarians in New Hampshire, for example, who got the anti-CRT bill through, so that stuff got out of New Hampshire, government schools. So that's generally the school of libertarian we have. That said, it is a big tent movement. So you will find both types. I would bet that percentage-wise, libertarians here, Trump versus Oliver, I don't know, 80-20 Trump.
Really? Probably, are you kidding me?
I don't. Do you think that's high or low? What do you? I think it's going to be high. Like no one in the party. I think there's a lot of Ross fans. I can say even inside of the New Hampshire Libertarian Party, I think almost everyone's gonna. I think there's going to be very few Oliver supporters. So I don't know.
Okay, but some percentage just aren't going to vote, so it can't really be 80-20.
Oh well.
You mean among
voters?
I
don't know. If you're a libertarian in New Hampshire and you're not voting, I don't take you seriously. You got to go in and vote here for the down ballot people. We have good libertarians on the ballot on almost every ballot. So even if you don't care about president, I would very much hope that libertarians in New Hampshire are voting. I think it's very important that we vote here.
What do you say to voting consents to the system? So it's better.
I think these people are they're just worthless. We have something that's actually working. We're getting people elected. Not only are we getting elected, we're moving up the power hierarchy. We have the House Majority Leader. We got our first state senator. This year, we're thinking we might get 2 or 3 state senators. We have Lily Tang Williams, who's a highly credible candidate to become our first congressperson. This is the way politics works. You got to do your time. It took Jason Osborne a decade before he became the House Majority Leader in New Hampshire. He was here for a decade working his butt off before he got there. But this is how it works. This is how you can actually win. People who want to drop out and do that for themselves, I can see that kind of thing. But if you want to actually achieve a libertarian order, a libertarian society, this is how you can do it. There is a real roadmap. It's actually working. Sometimes you have to swallow your pride a little bit. Sometimes you have to compromise a little bit. But if you want it, this is the plan. And if you don't want to do this, then maybe you don't want it. That's that's where I'm at this point. If you want, I'm not going to try to convince you to. I'm not going to try to convince someone to vote.
I think where I am at this point is, I'm always going to have the opinions that I have, and I'm always going to defend them and talk to people on this show, pro or con, to try to convince them of my ideas because I believe in them. But geez, there's something happens to you mentally. Do you mind if I ask how old you are, Jeremy?
I'm about to turn 40 this year.
Okay, so you're just a youngster. But when you're a guy like me, something happens to your brain, at least in my case, when you turn 50. Something happens in your brain. And the thing that happened in my brain was I said, I'm not going to get everything I want. And I've been fooling myself to think that I could. It doesn't mean I'm not going to try. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to spread everything I believe, from the rooftops. I absolutely am, and I yield to no one in terms of the amount of content I've put out, books I've written. So you can't pretend that I haven't paid my dues or done plenty of that. But but politics is a different thing. Politics is not all of life. I am not indicating my entire worldview in some candidate I happen to like. I'm just saying, I think this person will damage me less, or this other person is such an enemy of civilization, I just need to stop him. And maybe by getting this other one in, I can delay the collapse of civilization long enough for the normal people to get organized, because right now they're all just shell-shocked. That's the way I think about it. So I think to myself, I'm not going to get everything I want, but maybe I can get a few things that are really, really important, that like underpin everything that life is all about. Maybe I can get those few things. That's what I think about if I decide I'm going to cast a ballot. It's not, here, I've got my user manual here, and and you're not good on this, and this, so that means I can't. When in intellectual battles, that's fair game. But when it comes to this real life stuff, like for example, Ron DeSantis certainly has faults, but because I lived under Ron DeSantis, my kids had a normal life. I didn't have to shield them like Life is Beautiful, that movie. I was able to just have them go on living their lives, and that mattered. And if people hadn't voted for him, we would have had the drug addict with the prostitute in the hotel room who would have locked us all down and ruined everybody's lives. So that mattered. That made a practical difference. And if I had sat here and said, well, now, wait a minute, I'm pretty sure he's kind of unsound on the whatever question, then, I would have been able to sit in my locked down house, congratulating myself on sticking to my principles. And meanwhile, my kids' lives would have been ruined.
100% agree with you. I am, to be clear, I'm like basically an anarcho-capitalist. The kind of world that I would want to see is very different. I'm not trying to redesign society, but it would be substantially different. And I agree 100% that you pick the best of the worst options. That's the only way that you can have any chance to move things in the direction that you want to move them in. And I think it is good to have a realistic view of what's possible. I guess I will say, maybe, and I don't think this is quite what you were saying in your comment, but maybe a little bit, that I actually think we may be entering a kind of unprecedented era of change. I think that social media only fairly recently has enabled connections in these ways that are very different. And we are going to see more and more. The Free State Project, once again, the Libertarians were early in the same way that they were early on the internet. We're going to see more of this kind of thing because it's one of the few ways that you can actually do anything here. And I don't know if you've ever had Balaji Srinivasan on your program, but he would be excellent. He once went into Silicon Valley, the most prestigious group in Silicon Valley, and told them they should secede from the United States. He's like a hardcore libertarian guy. And he has this idea of network states and us and more segregation as people choose where they move. Conservatives moved to Florida. Gavin Newsom was advertising to liberals in Florida to leave. I mean, this is new. And because we don't have anywhere else to go in the world, because there are no more frontiers, what we're going to see is mimetic selection and organization of human affairs. And I think it's going to change things in ways that are very difficult to anticipate. But I think it's a trend that started and is going to continue to accelerate.
Jeremy, how do people follow you? Is it mostly Twitter, or is there some other way?
Twitter is the best way. I'm very active on Twitter under my full name. And anyone who's ever interested in visiting New Hampshire, coming up here, I'm always happy to help people learn more about it. Every libertarian needs to come up here at least once.
All right. Well, so Jeremy Kauffman, Kauffman, So 2 F's, 1 N. I'm right about that, right?
You got it.
Okay, so I'll link to that in the video description, also at tomwoods.com/2502. Well, thanks, Jeremy. We either have people thinking over what we said, cheering what we said, or throwing something at whatever device they're listening to. So I don't know. It's a combination of all three, but if I haven't got at least a little bit of all three of those in a Tom Woods Show episode, I feel like I haven't done my job. So thanks so much for being here today.
Cheers.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.